Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Security Repo Podcast. We have an awesome show for you this week. In fact, I am joined by the original host and creator of this program, Mackenzie Jackson. Good to see you again.
Hey, Dwayne. Yeah, great to be here. Full circle. I'm excited to be. This is my first time. I've done a lot of these episodes, my first time on this podcast as a guest. So,
Let's give you the full treatment as a guest. Mackenzie Jackson is a security researcher and advocate with a passion for code security. He's the former CTO and founder of Conpago, where he learned firsthand the importance of building secure applications. Today, Mackenzie works for Aikido Security to help developers and DevOps engineers build secure systems. And of course, he is the founder of this show. Welcome to the show, Mac.
it's so good to be here.
Well, it's great to see you, man. Excited to have you back. So, just start high level. What on earth is Aikido? What are you doing these days?
Yeah, well, Aikido is a code security company. It's where I've spent most of my career in code security now, and essentially, Aikido's goal is to secure your entire applications from the first line of code all the way through to the cloud. So, giving you that complete process. So, we're bringing together lots of different security tools, putting them together into a single dashboard. That's essentially our goal, and our kind of slogan is the no BS security. We're for devs, so we're trying to kind of get rid of some of the marketing crud that's out there and just build good tools that developers can use and secure applications.
If we're not securing the developer, how can we expect anything else to be secured? Let's dive in here about what you have seen change out in the world. You have a new perspective, no longer get Guardian, you're working with different types of customers, different types of developers. Uh, I think on the tip of everyone's mind is always going to be AI. So
Mm.
let's just start there. AI and open source security. What's the rundown?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much changing in the space of security along with AI. I think like everyone's kind of allergic to the marketing crud that's kind of came out there with AI, and there's so much hyperbolic statements around there that I think it's really hard to distinguish now what's actually happening in AI as it relates to security and kind of what's just kind of hyperbolic or marketing and everything. But there is some really interesting results that we're seeing out there in the place. And Aikido, we've done a lot of research and invested a lot of money in building out AI systems and trying to uncover this. And as it relates to open source specifically, there's some really interesting things that are happening in open source security. Just over a year ago, Aikido kind of came up with this hypothesis of the open source supply chain and how we're traditionally doing it isn't really working anymore. And part of the reason for that is if you look at traditional composition analysis tools, SCA tools, they look at all the dependencies that you have in your application, and then they look at the vulnerability databases and they match them together. Like, it does this open source tool or product have a vulnerability next to it? The problem is that these are actually pretty significant wait times in when a vulnerability is found and when it is kind of publicly available in this database with a severity score, and everything. So and this was working for a while, but AI's really kind of changed this, and that's because AI now can be used to discover vulnerabilities when they haven't made it to the vulnerability databases yet, and B, if they're not actually reported. Because the other thing about open source security is that for us to understand that we have a vulnerability in our dependency, we need it to be reported by someone. And a lot of the times it's actually not reported. It's not really like malicious intent, but a lot of the times these open source maintainers will discover a vulnerability themselves. They fix it and they don't necessarily tell anyone. The intentions behind that aren't always bad. They're not trying to deceive people, but they're just fixing a problem that they had, but not letting anyone know. Then people don't know that they're potentially using a vulnerable component. Now, how AI relates to all this, you're probably wondering, but we came up with a hypothesis based on things that we were kind of hearing around and that is that LLMs have become so small in terms of their computational power from when they were first created a few years ago that it's actually possible to start looking at data at scale. And this kind of reminds me of the founding story of Gig Guardian, where they started looking at the like all the public information at GitHub. So now, powered with LLMs, that at Aikido we decided that we're going to start looking at all of public change logs. So a change log is obviously when you update your software, you put it in a change log. Change logs can be on GitHub, or they can be on like a website, depending on like how you want to do it. So we started monitoring all of these change logs, and what the hypothesis that we had was that when someone creates a fix for a vulnerability, it will be in the change log long before it will be in the vulnerability database. So we used LLMs and AI to look through these change logs and pull out where we think a security issue has been fixed. And the reason why an LLM is kind of important to do this is that very rarely does a change log say something like fix the critical cross-site scripting vulnerability. Sometimes it does,
Yeah.
but most of the time, it's come down to something like fix the validation issue along those lines. And so what we started doing is monitoring all these different change logs. And what we found was really quite scary is that we found that we over the course of a year we found over 600 unreported vulnerabilities. It may not sound like a lot, but these were actually for very popular open source tools. We started with the top 5 million. Sounds like a lot. It's not that much. Top 5 million most popular open source packages. And what we found was that like 600 of these packages had updates which were patching vulnerabilities that were never reported in the databases. 67% of them never appeared with a CVE number, never appeared in a database. That could be because they weren't reported. Definitely some of them weren't. Could also be that the wait periods are so long that we're just waiting forever. But this is kind of like a use case of open source security where AI can actually help. We created a database ourselves called Intel. It's an open source database, so you can actually check it out. But this was like one of the areas where AI and open source is kind of coming at this crossroads, because any hypothesis that you make as a defender, like an attacker can make the equal but also opposite hypothesis of
Mhm.
here's an opportunity to attack things. So it's been really interesting going down that path, and it gives you kind of like an idea of, oh, here are some of the possibilities that we can do with AI. So this is one of them. This is one that we've come up with, but there's going to be a whole bunch more that's going to help keep us secure or keep us insecure, depending on which side of the coin you're on.
There's a lot to unpack there, man. That's a lot of information. But yeah, this reminds me that 0 day means 0 day for the larger world awareness,
Uh,
not the actual 0 day of the vulnerability. That was when you originally had the vulnerability in the products. That's really interesting to get ahead of known disclosure. There's that is a pack statement as well. Because you're right. If I fix a bug, I fixed a bug. Do I need to file a CVE on that? Ooh, that's a good question.
yeah.
Who wants to have their name attached to? I created this project. I made everybody invulnerable, or everybody vulnerable, and if I made everyone invulnerable, I think that'd be a positive. Everybody vulnerable. Wow, and now that's on the record historically.
Mm.
Um, yeah, on that, do you think there is a size of project where it becomes a responsibility to make a CVE? If it's like shared by 5 people, I'm not filing a CVE for that thing. Like,
Yeah, this is like an interesting. This is an interesting statement. I feel like I think every there's nuance in all of this, so it's hard for me to like pick a number and say, okay, if you have 1,000 people using your product in production, like then you need to. But it does come to that is basically like you should be following these protocols when you have anyone kind of using it in production. I have total sympathy for especially for smaller projects that you don't do that, and maybe it's like a low severity vulnerability too. But I do think like, but the correct answer to what you're saying is like I think we should always doing this. I think part of that is like getting rid or at least educating people that like if your project gets big, which is the goal, it is going to have vulnerabilities in it. It's not because you're a bad programmer. It's not because you made a crappy product. It's because it's just because that's how it is at the moment, where they can be very sophisticated, use it in totally unexpected ways, very hard to test a product for every possibility. So I think that there's a lot of like stigma attached to that of going through it. And then
Mhm.
also, like, there's the other side of the coin is like, how do we speed up the process of when a vulnerability is reported and published in these databases? Because it's not just open source maintainers that are kind of giving up time and resources into this. A lot of the people that are looking at these CVEs are also giving up their time and expertise to help keep things secure. So there's a lot to unpack there. I don't have the official answer, but I think, we should be rating CVEs. We should make it easy to submit CVEs, and we should get rid of the stigma behind it.
So you said something interesting there. So we as security researchers, we as security defenders can get ahead of this stuff at the same speed that the attackers are using LLMs to figure this stuff out, get to 0 day faster, get those exploits faster. At what point do we meet in the middle with the developer and like, hey, here's some tooling to not do these basic coding issues? Like, what's the roadmap look like for that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going to stick on the AI kind of trend as well. I think a lot of these tools exist. I mean, as we're both aware, there's lots of tools out there to help build more secure software. You got static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, dynamic application security testing, I should say, and you have all of these different tools. But a lot of the time, uh, they can be frustrating to use. And if you're going down this area of like a developer building out a project, if you get a security alert on a SAST, like on a coding issue, chances are if you've made that mistake, you don't actually automatically know how to fix it. So now you have to go down this rabbit hole to try and fix it. And then you're kind of trying to do research and you're trying to figure out, is this pretty obscure? Is this real? So a lot of people complain about false positives in SAST, but perhaps it's not actually false positives. It's just kind of a lack of understanding in some areas, although I'm sure we can all agree there are some. But AI is actually providing interesting paths into this too. And that is that in Aikido's product, for example, when we find coding issues, what we're able to do is generate a pull request of how to fix that automatically. So, like you submit, let's say you're not using prepared statements for SQL queries. You should be, but let's pretend that you're not. Then, if you submit that, it will be flagged by a SaaS tool, I, I, and that will automatically generate, hey, here's code that should fix this vulnerability. Now, I think we should have trust issues with AI and
Mm.
trusting it blindly. Like we shouldn't, like we have the ability now to automatically update this. But I think the fact that we can already get to the next step of asking someone we can investigate further gets us a lot there. And I think that makes these tools more accessible. If we're able to give developers, the tools to make their code more secure, to do it, but to do it easily, to not like disrupt them, then yeah, for sure, we're going to have like a much better time in this. And things like I talked about SQL injection because it's easy, but like 10% of the vulnerabilities that are found in both open source and closed sourced is SQL injection. This vulnerability
Still,
predates Doom. It predates Internet Explorer. Like yeah, where we still haven't got there. There's still a lot of people that haven't figured out prepared statements and other like methods of SQL injection. So there's still a long way to go, and you have to ask yourself why when we have tools, when we have the knowledge that we can do this. And I think a lot of it is just how accessible those tools can be. And I think we've got them. We've had them for a while. Now let's actually make them usable.
yeah, you're right. We're 20 years after Johnny Tables or Bobby Tables, XKCD,
Yeah.
drop table. Like, why is this still happening? Have we not learned to sanitize our inputs? Like yesterday, or by the time this goes out, I had a conversation recently with someone in a webinar, and it's like, how on earth are we still talking about like not sanitizing inputs as a vulnerability. Like, we've known about this in
Mm.
PHP world, we've known about this for 30 years, and it's still a problem with arrays. Ah, wanted to ask you one more question on the AI side before we move to the end of the show. Um, you did a bunch of research that I cite constantly on hallucinations,
Oh yeah.
specifically hallucinations of packages. One of my more popular talks I've been given is the hidden dangers of AI in the developer workflow, and that's a central piece of it. Is like developers don't know, so these hallucinations that people are squatting on uh, can just include a little bit of code. It does the thing you want it to do, plus a little bit extra. And that's really, really hard to guard against. So, how's your research? Have you still been looking into that?
Yeah, definitely. I have to give some credit here to Lasso Security and I think it's Leonardo. Leonardo is the name of like one of the security researchers at Lasso that actually first introduced me to this idea of hallucination. And then he showed it to me, and I said, "There's no way." So I then started redoing it, and I got really into it. So just a quick shout out there, but to explain like what hallucination, like package hallucination is I think most people understand AI hallucination now. It's when AI gives you a false answer. What's 2 plus 2, and it says 6. And like, but it does this all the time because AI is trained not to say no or not to give you wrong answers. And if you at home go and open up Chat GPT and you ask it to come up with open source packages for you. So let's say you have a problem, you have a node website and trying to connect to an Orient database. You put that exact problem into ChatGPT and you say, "Hey, I want you to come up with 4 different open source packages that I can use in this project, and I want you to give me the advantages of this." Now, and then it will do it, but a lot of the times the packages it gives you are completely false. They just don't exist. It gives you a 404 error. And that's because it's hallucinated them. It's looked in its database, it's looked in its model, and it said, "Hey, if this package did exist, this is what it would probably be called," right? It's kind of coming up with names for you rather than coming up with actual packages. And it's terrifying because we used to go on Stack Overflow or even just Googling things to try and find, hey, what's a suitable package for me? And what's really important is that Stack Overflow has comments. So if someone comes up with a really crappy package, there's going to be lots of comments on there. People say, "Hey, this is like, don't do this." Like, there's no shortage of nasty Stack Overflow replies. But when we ask ChatGPT, we have no context and we trust it blindly. We trust AI way more, and it leads the attack path that an attacker could actually create these packages and then ChatGPT could advertise them. So right now we get a 404 error, and the worst thing that potentially could happen is that our application doesn't work. But actually, the worst thing that could happen is that a package does exist, does what you're expecting to, but has a crypto miner, credential stealer inside it, and that's a attack path. Now, what's really interesting is that research has been done, and how this research was conducted was they took Stack Overflow questions, they put them into ChatGPT, and every time a package was spit out, they marked whether that package existed or didn't exist. And ChatGPT 3.5, I'm stretching my memory, but I think it was around about like 22% were hallucinated. 4 got worse, went up to 24%. Gemini, and other areas got like 60% hallucinated. So it's a significant problem. What's difficult is that we can't do any more research, really, to say, "Hey, is this getting better or worse?" Because how do we know that the packages exist because they've been created maliciously? Like, for sure, the numbers will go down now. But is that because people are aware of this attack path? It has been talked about a lot. Or is it because the models are getting better? Like, who knows? And then you can go down the whole path of like data poisoning. And we're doing some. I'm letting the cat out of the bag here, but we're doing some research at the moment into uh, what content is optimized for Chat GPT or like for large language models in terms like kind of like SEO for AI. Like what do these models enjoy more? Turns out the models like best AI generated content. So like we're really getting into the dead internet theory here because like the way that it formats it, it likes to ingest it. So like so it's quoting itself. So then you have all of these things where like packages could be given because they've been generated, like the descriptions of them has been generated by AI, and AI enjoys consuming that very precise, concise data. And then dead internet theory ensues and everything's fake.
Wow. Well, at least we have LLMs on our side to start sorting through it and see, hey, does this contain anything bad? So maybe there's a
Yeah.
future there where it's battling itself. But yeah, dead internet, that's a terrifying dystopian way to think about that.
Yeah.
All right, Mac. Well, man, it's been great to having you back on the show, but it's time for that. You get to be on the receiving end of this. You've never had this before.
Oh no, I haven't even thought. I knew it was coming. I didn't even think about it. Oh my god.
We got
Okay.
we got four questions we ask everybody these days. We'll just start rapid fire. The first one: what is your all-time favorite security command line tool?
Should I say GG Shield? No. I think I'm going to say Nmap. I really like Nmap. You can find some really interesting things, and when you go into kind of looking at it. It's a tool that I've like recently started using, so it's kind of like top of mind. But I'm going to
Okay,
go with Nmap.
that's a pretty popular one. Netcat and Nmap, like I think, are the two most popular we've ever gotten.
Right.
Uh, and when you were interviewing at companies, what is your favorite interview question that you have ever been asked?
The question they asked, the person said, "I really hate surprises. So, what's one thing that might surprise me about you when you join the company
Huh.
in a negative way?" And that question was asking exactly what is your weaknesses, but asking it in a way where I kind of felt like I had to be more truthful. And so I was like, and then I thought about that afterwards, being like, that is what that question is. But he asked it in a way that did catch me off guard, and like I gave an honest answer to. So I think that was like one of my favorite interview questions, or at least one of the most memorable ones that I thought about.
Right on. All right. What is the best security advice you could give anyone out there right now, or that you're hearing out there right now?
I would say that the best security advice right now is that you have to be skeptical when integrating AI into your security tools, but don't be fearful of it. AI is really going to be here to help. There is a lot of FUD. There is a lot of uncertainty around it and with data issues. So be skeptical, but don't be fearful when deciding to integrate AI into your security tooling, into your security workflows.
And finally, what's the worst security advice you've ever heard?
I'm gonna go with like very recent where I got into there's someone was posting on social media on LinkedIn about secrets that can be leaked in Git, which is a topic I know a lot about, as you may know. And the advice was if you leak a secret in Git, you should be able to react efficiently and make the repo private or delete the repo if you can. That was like in the advice, which is bad for a number of reasons. So I had to really like hold my tongue when looking at that, being like, it's not today's not the day. Today's not the day.
You're not gonna fight that fight today. So you fought that fight for a very long time, and you're still fighting
uh,
it every
I'm
day.
still look. I'm still fighting it. Yeah.
Oh man, well, thank you so much for being here, dude. It's always good to see you. I have to have you back again more often, just to catch back up and figure out what you're doing over at Aikido. Uh, Always give it up to the guest for the last word. What, any advice, any where would we follow you? Anything else you want to plug? Anything else you want to say?
Well, I think you can follow me anywhere on social media at Advocate Mac. I'm about to embark on a bit of a speaking tour at the moment. So if you're heading to RSA or a lot of the B sides in the US in May and April, I might be there. You can follow me on social media for more. And if you're curious about Aikido Security, then check it out. Free forever for small teams. And we're trying to build cool shit for developers.
All right, we will throw links down to all that in the show notes. But thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks for having me.